Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Finance, economy, the stock market. This week we have Tesla moving a lot higher with good news about the robo-taxis and also the slashing of prices. Bad news on the economy, did not grow as fast as anticipated, and now we have inflation going up again, which is going to start eating our pockets, and another bank failure, which is not bueno. Let's go ahead and get started. The U.S. economy grew at its slowest pace since 2022. The first 3 months of the year grew at a 1.6% annualized rate, or other words, only grew 0.4%, 0.40. Not good for the economy. Looks like the consumers now are starting to be affected in regards to the inflation, and also just, it is inflation, but just the prices of everything going up. And so the problem with this is that now we have a situation where the inflation was expected to go down. It's going up higher than expected, right? I believe it was at the 3.7% print, 0.1% more than expected. But the problem is that since it's still creeping up, that means that the Fed, which is the central bank in the United States, probably isn't going to raise rates as fast as we wanted them to. Now, that's not a good thing due to the fact that the economy in the United States is almost 70% consumer spending, meaning you and I going out and spending money is what almost 70% of the economy in the U.S. is. And so it looks like the consumers started to scale back a little bit due to the situation with inflation, and might be not bueno for the economy, for the presidential election coming up either. Republic First Bank, another bank that is collapsed and seized by regulators. It was sold to another bank. This to me is kind of a red flag due to the fact that, everything was supposed to be okay. Everything was kind of fine. And all of a sudden just a bank collapses out of nowhere. Conspiracy Marcello says that they're going to do it on purpose. They're going to collapse the system to bring in the new digital currency where they're going to not allow you to buy meat and only drive 5 minutes from your house. Stay tuned next time on Conspiracy Marcello. There was a guy I saw on Instagram. He drives a Hyundai, one of the electric cars. And in an update that he took to the dealership, he read the terms and conditions, and it said things like, it can limit you from driving in certain places. They can control your car to allow you to only drive a certain distance from your home. So if you don't think that communism is coming, prepare yourself. All the stock markets, most around the world, all positive. The U.S., Europe, Latin America, the Middle East had half and half, positive and negative. And Asia even was mostly higher as well. This is due to the fact that the World War III phenomenon has calmed down a little bit. Iran actually said that they're not going to retaliate against Israel again. So it looks like for now, we're okay. World War III is pending still. Bitcoin and crypto news. We had the fourth halving event of Bitcoin. Essentially, since there's a certain amount of Bitcoin, I believe it's 21 million, that can't be produced more of, what happens is they bring down the cost to mine it, or the rewards, I should say, to mine it. So this is the fourth time. Every time there is a halving, generally we see a little bit of an increase in the price or a little bit of movement in the price of Bitcoin. This time we didn't. For the week, Bitcoin is down. I accidentally deleted the percentage, but it got to 62,761 as of Saturday morning. Commodities, crude, it was at its lowest level since March. It came down a little bit. For the week, both the U.S. and also the international were both positive. The U.S. was at 83.85, while the international was at 89.50. And essentially what happens is, since we don't have this warning of World War III happening tomorrow, there's less uncertainty about what's going on with the economy. With less uncertainty, that means that people aren't as worried, so they stop kind of panic buying. And that's part of the reason why we didn't have that much movement in oil. Copper prices are on a run, though. It's a fifth positive week for copper. They got to 9,852 and change a ton. Remember, we still have that situation with cacao where it surged in price to over $11,000 per ton. So at one point, the cacao was actually more expensive than copper, believe it or not. And for the week, due to the fact that there isn't worries about the world war starting next week or tomorrow, precious metals were also down. Gold went down 2.30% to $2,338.40, while silver had a big move down over 5% negative to 27.26. Financial and banking news, ECB officials, the European Central Bank, said that they're planning to continue to drop the interest rates multiple times this year. This is in contrast now to what the U.S. is doing due to the fact that the interest rates in the United States may be delayed by our central bank due to the increase in inflation. And along with tensions in the Middle East, obviously keeps oil prices high. And remember that the higher oil prices are, the more that it affects inflation. And the reason why is because essentially the whole world runs on oil. If you want to ship something in the interior of the country in the United States, for example, you send it with a diesel-powered, oil-powered semi-truck. Europe is a little bit different. They have a lot of trains, but for the most part, most of the world basically runs that way with the huge semi-trucks running on gas. So the higher gas is, the higher oil is, the higher prices are because it kind of runs through the entire supply chain. The Japanese yen hit a multi-year low against Europe, the euro, and the dollar. The euro hit its highest point in 2008. It's super expensive. The sushi is amazing. So if you want to go to Japan, you might want to look into doing that soon because you've got a lot of buying power. And the U.S. Senate on Tuesday passed a package to provide billions in aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. They gave $60 billion to Ukraine, $26 billion to Israel, $8 billion to Taiwan, and none for U.S. citizens. So keep going. Keep voting for the Uniparty. U.S. inflation worries grow. Investors are preparing for the 10-year Treasury note to surpass a 16-year high of 5%. So a Treasury note is essentially the debt of the United States. And, they have different time limits. This one is the one for the 10-year. And the problem that we have now is that I believe about a third of the debt that we have is going to be rolled over. So before we had, 1, 2, 3% interest rates, and now they're going to be 5, 6, 7% interest rates. Now, the problem now is that the interest on the debt is the biggest expense, getting to be the biggest expense. And with this, now the interest on the debt of a third of our debt is going to skyrocket, double or triple the cost of what it was before. So there's a big problem because now it's literally unsustainable for us to be able to sustain the debt because we have a deficit in our budget, which means that we're borrowing even more money to pay for the things like protecting Ukraine's border and Taiwan's border, but not our own border. And then we also have a situation where more and more countries are starting to not use the dollar when before it was kind of the standard, right? So if China was paying, for example, Brazil, China would change dollars and then pay Brazil in dollars. And it was always like that between all the other countries. Now, one of the things that's really interesting is that there are more dollars outside of the U.S. than there is inside of the U.S. So what's happening? We don't have enough money to pay our own debt, and the value or the cost of the interest of the debt is continuing to skyrocket, which means that we're going to have to print money, just flip a switch and just create money out of thin air. And then on the second hand, more and more countries are starting to do bilateral trade with their own currencies, sending all those dollars back home. So we have two really big problems that's going to add to the supply of the dollars. And if you think about just products, for example, a Hyundai or a Chevy, the more there is of something, the cheaper it is. And when we talk about money, the cheaper the dollar is going to be, that means that the prices are going to continue to go up, which means very high inflation. Now, when all those trillions of dollars come back, the ones from foreign countries that aren't using it anymore, and the printing that we're doing, we're going to have a very bad problem with inflation. Political news. The Spanish Socialist Prime Minister Sanchez is going to resign due to the corruption of his indicted wife. No surprise, these corrupt bastards in the government. Economic news, U.S. home sales rose to 639,000, the highest level since September 2023, even though 30-year mortgages are extremely high at 7.1%. Now, if consumer spending is about 70% of the economy, construction and housing is about 17% of the economy. So this isn't going to be able to continue when it comes on the housing front due to the fact that since the interest rates are going to stay higher for longer and maybe even higher due to the inflation, that's going to come down too. So you can see how we're starting to have a lot of whammies hit the U.S. economy. India's business activity climbed at the fastest pace in 14 years. Eurozone business activity expanded in April, and the UK business sector also showed strength, while U.S. manufacturing and services hit a multi-month low in April, indicating a potential slowdown in the U.S. economic growth. So again, probably going to be a big factor in the presidential election if the economy slows to a halt. Corporate news, Tesla fell 5% on Monday after they said that they were going to slash prices by $2,000 on the Model 3 and Model Y, mainly in China, Germany, and the United States. They did also say, however, that they're going to be focusing on robo-taxis in addition to accelerating the development of the vehicles that are more affordable, like the Model 2. So even though there was some bad news on their margins, they have some good news on the other hand. That's the reason why they went up. Facebook also plunged 18% after reporting that they're not going to have such a good 2024 when it comes to revenue as they thought of before. They did beat Q1 expectations, however, but more and more companies now are starting to report that it's not going to go so well for us in 2024. And the U.S. telecommunications giant Verizon also went down almost 5%, reporting the same thing, that 2024 is not going to be so hot. And Chipotle, the best American food chain, best food on the planet, still love it, I don't care what you say. They went up over 6%, so if you're tired of paying, a fortune for Five Guys burgers, if you guys heard me talk about the Five Guys stories, go to Chipotle because it's amazing. They had same store rise in sales of 7%, and they beat across the board, so they went up quite a bit. And Google parent Alphabet went up over 10% after they topped estimates as well. I won't bore you guys with like the exact numbers and everything because I think, oh yeah, you made $1 billion, they made $1 trillion. I don't think it matters at this point. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. I think, if they beat estimates, probably want to know that, but other than that, in technology, Intel is unveiling its third-generation AI chip, which supposedly is going to be just as good as NVIDIA, so the AI situation is continuing to go up. Oh, and coming back on the Chipotle thing, I just read that a bowl of steak in California costs $32. The great Communist Republic of California. So don't go to Florida and Texas and vote the same way you voted in California. Just FYI. International events. The Guangdong province in China, over 120 million people are in a really bad situation with floods, and we had very catastrophic tornadoes all throughout the Mideast in the United States. Like I told you guys in 2020, for you, those of you guys that have been following me for a while, we're going to start to see a lot more of these earthquakes and disasters. I think we're also probably going to see a really big earthquake in California, probably the next, I want to say within 3 years. All the insurance companies are starting to bail in California. You can see the earthquakes coming around. We had that huge one, if you remember, in Japan on January 1st, which I think is a bad omen for what's going to happen this year. And it's kind of coming around the ring of fire. Chile got hit by 2 4.1s recently, and we're just going to kind of, even here in Colombia, I remember the first 10 years or so that I was here, I think I felt one earthquake. And I think this year alone, I think I felt 3 or 4 earthquakes. So it's like things are starting to heat up. And interesting facts, 9 investigations into plastic bags being recycled in Central Florida found that a lot of these plastic bags aren't being recycled at all and just being dumped in waste dumps, essentially. 2 of the cases that they put these air tags in were in Malaysia, known to be a plastic waste dump. So if you think you're saving the planet by recycling, probably better to use things like carton bags instead of plastic bags and glass bottles instead of plastic bottles. It's a lot better for your health as well. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. And remember, the preppers were right.